All right, good morning, folks. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I'm State Senator Nick Miller, represent parts of Lehigh and Northampton counties. As a committee today, we're examining the Commonwealth's actions, plans, and progress around safeguarding our water systems and residential wells. I want to acknowledge we've got our leader, Jay Costa, on, our Appropriations Chair, Vincent Hughes, on Zoom as well. A number of our other members are going to be joining, and my co-host, Senator Malone. I want to give an overview of the purpose of the hearing, and then I'm going to kick it over to Senator Malone for some opening remarks. We want to assess the existing practices and plans around the Commonwealth's water systems and residential wells. We know that we need to take proactive measures to protect these vital resource for every Pennsylvanian to provide safe and clean drinking water. So without that further ado, Senator Malone.
Yay, tech. Okay. Well, thank you, Senator Miller, the witnesses, and all of the staff for making this hearing possible. Also, my thanks goes out to the Susquehanna National Heritage area for hosting here in their facility, the Columbia Crossing River Trail Center. My children and I spent countless hours wandering the coast of the river trail on both sides and this portion of the Susquehanna, and I'm always pleased to be back here. As you may know, East Petersburg Borough was incorporated on December 20th, 1946, just 79 years ago, in order to establish a municipal water system to fight an epidemic of typhoid fever caused by municipal and residential wells contaminated because they were too close to sewage sources. Today, approximately 3.5 million people in Pennsylvania rely on private wells, and roughly 20,000 new wells are drilled each year. Safeguarding this residential source of water is critical. We have approximately 38,000 private wells in Lancaster County, and the highest number per county after Chester. The majority of these wells have at least one water quality problem. These issues vary in severity and risk to the well users. Yet, other than a few local and county ordinances, there are no statewide construction standards for private wells. Testing well water quality and using best practices to protect against contaminants are critical to ensure the quality of well water and the health of our residents. In one recent Penn State statewide study, a survey of a very small sample of Lancaster wells were found to exceed the federal Environmental Protection Agency's maximum contaminant level for harmless forever chemicals. I look forward to the discussions of the challenges and opportunities of safeguarding residential water wells. I'm sure together we can come up with ways to help improve and protect the wells and water so many people across our Commonwealth depend on. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Malone. So just for today's structure, we've got 4 panels. The second panel is on Zoom. Our first panel, Commonwealth Agency Insights. We have representatives from DEP and DCNR. Jill, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair Miller, Senator Malone, and members of the Pennsylvania Senate Democratic Policy Committee. I'm Jill Whitcomb. I'm the Deputy Secretary for the Office of Water Programs at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today to share how we implement the various laws and regulations in order to protect and safeguard our waters in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a long history of protecting our waters through legislative and regulatory action going back to the early 1900s. In addition to administering the state laws to protect Pennsylvania's waters, DEP also administers many of the federal requirements under the Clean Water Act, notably the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, Permitting and Compliance Program, and the Section 319 Non-Point Source Management Program. DEP also maintains the primacy of the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act in Pennsylvania, providing for the protection of drinking waters for over 8,000 public water systems that serve more than 11 million Pennsylvania residents. The laws administered by DEP that most directly impact residential wells and groundwater are the Clean Streams Law, the Sewage Facilities Act, Nutrient Management Act, Solid Waste Management Act, and the Water Resources Planning Act, as well as the regulations and the programs under those statutes. We should consider the pollutants that commonly impact private drinking water wells, as Senator Malone had noted earlier. High nitrate levels are known to cause health concerns in pregnant women and babies. And drinking water with nitrate levels of 10 parts per million or higher is considered unsafe. A common source of nitrates is nitrogen fertilizers such as animal manure, as well as sewage. Pathogens like E. coli and Giardia can come from animal and human wastes as well. Chapter 91 under the Clean Streams Law includes requirements for land application of manure from agricultural operations. All agricultural operations that land apply manure in Pennsylvania are regulated. Some are regulated under the Nutrient Management Act as concentrated animal operations, or CAOs. Others are regulated under the Federal Clean Water Act under the NPDES Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations, or CAFOs. DEP jointly administers the Nutrient Management Act with the State Conservation Commission and many of our participating and partnering conservation districts to help agricultural operations meet these requirements. DEP's municipal and residual waste regulations also require permits and plans for the land application of biosolids or sewage sludge and food processing residuals, also known as FPRs. Biosolids and FPRs have nutrients much like animal manure, which aid in crop growth. And DEP is currently in the early stages of revising and updating the general permits for the land application of biosolids. Land application setback requirements, or buffer zones, for manure, biosolids, and FPRs are instituted to help ensure the prevention of contamination of wells, nearby springs, and other sensitive areas like streams, rivers, wetlands, sinkholes, and channels. The requirements also include restrictions on winter land application, and more information can be found in the comparison chart that was provided to you along with my written testimony. DEP implements the Sewage Facilities Act alongside our local municipalities and other local agencies through 3 primary regulations, Chapter 71, 72, and 73. These chapters work together to ensure protection of groundwater and surface water, and in an effort to modernize the regulations and better clarify existing rules and standards, DEP is also currently in the early phases of revising these 3 chapters for the first time in 25 years. DEP works closely with the municipalities and local agencies as they directly implement the Sewage Facilities Act. Local agencies employ sewage enforcement officers, or SEOs, and DEP provides the training and the certification program for 640 current SEOs in Pennsylvania. The Water Resources Planning Act is implemented by DEP through the convening of state water planning committees, which comprises many of our partners and stakeholders in Pennsylvania, for the development and update of the state water plan. This plan is intended to inform leaders' decision-making and educate all Pennsylvanians on the sustainable use and stewardship of our surface and groundwaters. While the development and the update of the state water plan is mandated by statute, the implementation of it is voluntary. DEP is currently convening state water planning committees to make the relevant updates to the state water plan in accordance with the Act currently. So I talked about some of the laws and the regulations. There is also funding, right? Financial assistance provided. Our watershed restoration to protect, restore, and improve our Commonwealth's water resources, notably our DEP Growing Greener Plus program from the Environmental Stewardship Fund, and the Non-Point Source Management Grant Program under the Section 319 and Clean Water Act are 2 of those programs. DEP also works with the Pennsylvania Infrastructure Investment Authority, or PENVEST, to provide the crucial investments for larger scale infrastructure. One of their programs is the Homeowner Sewage Program, which provides low interest loans for the repair and replacement of on-lot sewage systems, and that's administered by the Pennsylvania Housing and Finance Agency. In closing, DEP recognizes that protection and restoration of water resources is fundamental to the environmental sustainability and economic development in Pennsylvania's communities. We are committed to implementing and continuously improving our regulations, policies, and programs to ensure clean water for all Pennsylvania residents and visitors. I look forward to answering any of your questions that you may have, and I appreciate your continued interest and engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Gail?
Sorry. Good morning, Chairman Miller, Senator Malone, and members of the Policy Committee. My name is Gail Blackmer. I serve as the State Geologist and Director of the Bureau of Geological Survey in the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I'm excited to be here today to talk about establishing professional licensing criteria for water well, geothermal, geotechnical, and environmental well drillers. Driller licensure will establish statewide construction and siting standards for private wells through best industry practices and institute statewide certification and licensing standards for water, geothermal, and environmental geotechnical well drillers. This has been a long time policy priority for DCNR, as well as for a diverse set of nonprofit and industry stakeholders across the Commonwealth. Licensing is necessary in order to strengthen accountability within the industry, ensure industry construction and siting standards are upheld, and support public health and consumer protection. Water wells are the primary source of drinking water for millions of Pennsylvanians, and yet the Commonwealth is one of only 2 states that do not enforce industry standards for well siting and construction, and one of only 3 states that do not have statewide industry licensing requirements. Proper siting and construction protect a well from common sources of contamination like septic systems, roads, fuel tanks, livestock yards, and agricultural chemicals. In Pennsylvania, there are no standards required for well drillers and no protections in place for homeowners. This leaves many Pennsylvanians vulnerable to improperly sited and/or constructed wells that can result in water contamination, health issues, and costly repair bills. Even just one improperly sited or poorly constructed private well can threaten the integrity of neighboring private and public water supplies, potentially endangering entire communities. This means how your neighbor's well is sited and constructed can impact the quality of water coming out of your faucet. Additionally, Pennsylvania is experiencing more periods of drought in recent years. Wells that are properly sited and constructed in bedrock are less susceptible to the impacts of a long-term drought than poorly sited and poorly constructed shallow wells. The drilling of water, geothermal, and environmental geotechnical wells requires a level of expertise in geology, drilling techniques, environmental regulations, and industry standards to safeguard water quality and protect public health. The Bureau of Geological Survey is currently responsible for licensing Pennsylvania water well drillers. However, that licensure is nothing more than a transactional process in which the company pays the department a nominal fee to be licensed. There are no demonstrations of aptitude or experience, and no professional or industry standards are enforced. If we want to ensure that Pennsylvanians have access to safe water supplies, we need to do what 47 other states have done in terms of establishing licensing criteria, and what 48 states have already done in requiring the industry uphold siting and construction standards. The good news is that we can water 2 plants with 1 watering can, so to speak. We believe we can accomplish both of these important policy priorities through a common sense approach that relies on existing industry standards without adding new regulations or permitting processes. In doing so, licensed drillers would be required to uphold the industry standards that are set within the Uniform Construction Code, UCC, related to siting and constructing wells in Pennsylvania. DCNR supports a licensing framework that would add the well drillers to the Crane Operating Board to build on efficiencies of an existing board. This pairing makes sense because these two occupations are both considered trades that do not require four-year degrees, are involved in pre-construction and construction activities, and require the operation of heavy machinery and mobile hydraulic equipment. This licensing criteria would propose two categories of licensing for water, geothermal, and environmental geotechnical drillers. An expert well driller category would demonstrate competency in 3 or more drilling techniques. A specialized driller category would show proficiency in just one. For example, if a driller solely constructs water wells, they would seek the specialized category for water well drilling. Additionally, a trainee category would establish a much-needed entry point into the drilling workforce. A 2-year grandfathering phase would allow all existing qualifying drillers to acquire their licensing credentials by demonstrating the appropriate footage of drilling in the past 5 years. New licensees would be required to pass applicable examinations as determined by the board. Licensing would be renewed every 2 years, and licensed drillers would be responsible for upholding the licensing criteria and completing the necessary continuing education as determined by the board. This novel approach achieves a key objective: improving the quality and safety of private water wells while relying on existing industry standards and without adding new permitting or regulatory processes. Well drillers will be required to uphold industry standards established through the International Plumbing Code within the Uniform Construction Code and reviewed every 3 years by the UCC Review and Advisory Council. It would also establish greater accountability within the industry by requiring companies to demonstrate bonding and liability coverage and ensure additional consumer protections are put in place in the case of an accident or incompetency. Because Pennsylvania for too long has not had accountability in place for this industry, it is important to ensure drillers will not be held liable for wells that have been drilled prior to the enactment of this legislation or for the actions of another driller. This legislation would maintain existing reporting requirements that have been in place for decades while adding a new category for well modifications. Those reports go to DCNR's Bureau of Geological Survey, which manages the Pennsylvania Groundwater Information System, or PAGWIS. PAGWIS holds hundreds of thousands of water well records and more than 2,000 records for springs, making it an important source of groundwater, water well, and spring data that is accessed by hundreds of users every day. All licensed drillers would need to be associated with a registered well drilling company, and each drilling company would need to register through the Department of State. In an effort to improve efficiencies and reduce burdens on the industry, drillers would no longer be required to register their drills with the licensing agency. They would only be required to acquire the proper registrations through PennDOT. A few things this legislation will not do. This is not intended to regulate oil and gas activity. In Pennsylvania, the regulation of natural gas and oil drilling is comprehensive and stringent. This proposal does not require water well testing and leaves that up to the local and county jurisdictions. We certainly advise well owners to test their water annually to ensure that the water is safe. Water well tests can detect contaminants and allow well owners to take corrective action. This proposal does continue the well reporting functionalities that have been in place for decades, but does not include an individual well registration requirement. This proposal does not establish any permitting requirements for well drilling. That functionality most commonly occurs at the municipal or county level. Finally, this proposal does not institute additional environmental regulations. It instead relies on the industry standards that have been adopted through the Uniform Construction Code. This proposed licensing framework has been vetted across agencies and is supported not just by DCNR, but by the Department of Environmental Protection, Department of State, Department of Labor and Industry, Department of Agriculture, Department of Health, and PennDOT. Additionally, this proposed framework has received support by a wide variety of partners, including the Choose Clean Water Coalition, Pennsylvania Environmental Council, Pennsylvania Council of Professional Geologists, National Association of Water Companies, Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Association, Pennsylvania Rural Health Association, the Pennsylvania Independent Oil and Gas Association, and the Marcellus Shale Coalition. The result is a common-sense bipartisan approach that establishes a licensing framework within the Department of State to emphasize public health, public safety, consumer protections, and industry accountability. This license framework establishes a fair playing field within the industry so that certain drillers cannot simply underbid by building inferior and unsafe wells. The licensing criteria is consistent with what many states have in place and does not establish excessive or burdensome requirements for acquiring and maintaining licensure. There are so many reasons why Pennsylvania should adopt this licensing criteria, but I want to reinforce these important points. We need to protect human health. We need to safeguard our drinking water and groundwater resources, advance professional accountability within the industry, promote workplace safety, uphold environmental laws and regulations, ensure continued education, and establish ongoing workforce pipelines for entering into the drilling industry. This proposed legislation is a long time in the making, and several attempts to bring accountability to the industry have failed over the past 30 years. The novel framework addresses the major concerns that have surfaced during the prior attempts with a deliberate effort to strengthen efficiencies and reduce redundancies while accomplishing our overarching goal of safeguarding Pennsylvania's drinking water. If not now, when? Thank you for this opportunity to testify. We look forward to the support of committee members in passing the legislation that establishes the licensing criteria. I am happy to answer any of your questions, and please feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any follow-up questions.
Thank you both. I'll open it to questions from my colleagues. Senator Malone.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you've got a lot of data on the wells and springs. Does the Commonwealth have a clear, like, statewide map of vulnerable aquifers and of wells that are there?
You can make a map of the wells. We do not, at this time, have a map of what we would call vulnerable aquifers. Much of the water doesn't come out of what most people think of as aquifers. It comes out of fracture flow.
Sorry, I was thinking more of
it's
the.
Okay. It's all right.
I'm thinking more of like our watershed areas and where things are drawn.
I think we can think of all of the water sources in Pennsylvania as being vulnerable at this point.
One, I think that's a pretty big one. So, okay, so we're holding this here in, Susquehanna River, Columbia. We have a lot of trouble with flooding. Do we have kind of guidelines and outlines or concerns of how to deal with contamination possibilities from our local wells with flooding as a concern?
At some level, you're not ever going to be able to protect a well from flooding, but your best chance will be to have a properly constructed well that is protected as much as possible from surface runoff and that's sealed so that the floodwater can't actually get into it.
I'll add, so the Floodplain Management Act and the Chapter 106 that goes along with that, floodplain management is really important, especially at the local scale. So not only from a flooding, a property damage and potential loss of life, but to your question, how it may impact the drinking water source of those residents where the flooding is happening. So the implementation of that act, especially at the municipal and the local scale. The Stormwater Management Act as well, or Act 167, has a lot to do with that as well, and managing stormwater. As was noted earlier, we're going into a lot of more drought conditions. We're also having a lot more severe and intensive rain events that leads to those flood impacts.
Thank you.
I've got just a couple quick questions. Obviously, it's a very complex issue of making sure that the water coming out of the faucet is clean. And I think of it as two things. One, addressing the contamination that is happening right now. And we've done some work on PFAS. We were successful in securing a PennVest grant for Emmaus, which is in my district, for the public water system. But you mentioned residential water wells that are contaminated with whatever it may be. What kind of grant programs are out there that we could point constituents to for addressing that?
A very good question, and like you said, PennVest with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund has been able to provide funding to public water systems because they are the ones that have the maximum contaminant level requirements for public drinking water, for PFAS, PFOA, and PFAS contamination. As it relates to residential homeowners, there are some programs that are available. Like I mentioned, the one that is related more for the sewage, the on-lot sewage disposal repairs and replacements. That's really important because if your on-lot sewage system is not functioning, it could very well impact your well or your neighbor's well in a very harmful way. So that's one, looking at those opportunities to ensure that the area that's surrounding the well is protected from those setback requirements, those buffer requirements. There are other funding sources available, and I'll look into that further and provide a list to you after this.
Okay, thank you. And one last question is, we've seen kind of a rise in microplastics. Have you seen kind of that impact on local water wells, and what can we be doing about that?
So a very good question. Most of what our focus has been on surface water impacts for microplastics. Not quite sure how it may be impacting residential drinking water wells at this time.
Is that something we should be looking into, or any?
Again, I can look into it when I get back to the office and provide you with what we have, and then from there, potentially looking into it further.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for my colleagues, Senator Koster, Senator Hughes, Senator Malone? Anything else? Okay, well, thank you both for joining us this morning. We'll move on to our second panel, the overview of state practices. We've got representatives from the Center for Rural Pennsylvania online. I think Laura and Caitlin, can you hear us? Are you with us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good morning, Chairman Miller, Senator Malone, and other distinguished members of the Senate and staff. Thank you for the invitation to speak before you today. My name is Laura Domino. I am the Assistant Director at the Center for Rural Pennsylvania, and I am joined today by my colleague, Caitlin Good, our Data Visualization Specialist. We are going to take turns presenting testimony to you. And in addition, we've provided written testimony. We will not read all of it, but just highlight some key points. And if I may, I'd also like to note that we're joined via Zoom by the Center's new Executive Director, Zachary Adams. I'd like to introduce him to the committee. He literally started yesterday, but invited him to attend with us today. And indeed, in the future, may be the one providing testimony. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Zach.
So the Center, as you know, is an agency of the General Assembly. We are a bipartisan, bicameral agency. And one of our key functions is to fund research on topics important to the Commonwealth and that affect, in particular, rural areas. of the state, as you well know. So our role is to provide information to the General Assembly and other key stakeholders at the county and local level as well, to help inform your decisions about whether and how to act. We do not write policy or make recommendations, but put information in front of you. So today we are focusing on residential water well safety. And we released a report in 2009 that focused on measuring this. And we're going to summarize that research design and some key points from it. This is also wonderful timing because in about 2 to 3 months, the center is going to release another study that has been ongoing over the last 2 years on septic systems and well safety. So we're very happy to know that our current research program aligns with the interests of the Senate. So I'm going to proceed to talk a little bit about the landscape of regulation, which the previous speakers have already touched upon. As you know, over 3 million rural and suburban residents in the state rely on private wells for drinking water. And in 2009, according to the study we published, it was estimated that each year about 20,000 new wells are drilled. And I think that was stated before as well. Research has shown that many private wells in the state have failed at least one drinking water standard. And as already was presented to you earlier, Pennsylvania remains one of the very few states without any private well regulations. Location, construction, testing, treatment become largely the responsibility of the homeowner, which means that the bulk of public safety, water safety is in their hands. And we know that some counties and municipalities have passed ordinances, but the extent to which those are enforced or homeowners are aware of them varies considerably. Overall, it's estimated that 90% of residential homes with a well also have a private septic system on site. And as a previous speaker noted, this is a concern about maintenance. The Kabuye study, which we will be releasing in a few months, shows, based on past research, about 25% of homes in rural and suburban areas of Pennsylvania rely upon on-lot septic systems rather than public sewage systems to treat waste. As with private wells, the bulk of responsibility for maintaining and monitoring septic systems lies in the hands of the private homeowner. Some municipalities do have sewage management programs that require homeowners to show proof of periodic on-site inspections of septic systems and pumping of septic systems. But there's a great deal of variation in enforcement, and so the study that we're going to release soon will evaluate the extent to which homeowners are actually following guidelines, even in the absence, perhaps, of municipal enforcement. As noted, I think earlier, the Pennsylvania Sewage Facilities Act, known as Act 537, provides all kinds of provisions for municipalities to develop a sewage facilities plan, and through a trained sewage enforcement officer to manage permitting and installation for the construction of septic systems. There are also regulations about the maintenance of septic systems in the state, and these are based upon EPA, right, Federal Department of Environmental Protection standards as well. Just to give you a quick overview, the federal level EPA recommends septic systems be inspected every 3 years. Septic tanks should be pumped every 3 to 5 years, or if an inspection warrants more frequent pumping. Of course, we know septic system users and owners may or may not be following this. So the study that we'll release in a few months will show the extent to which this occurs. This, in short, is an issue because effluent from the septic system may leak. And if the homeowner is getting drinking water from a well on the same property, there are concerns with contamination between those two systems. And now I'll let Caitlin take over. She's going to briefly summarize some of the key findings from that 2009 study for you.
Yes, thank you, Laura. So the 2009 study by Swissoft, Fundens, and Sharp focused on the impact of natural factors such as geology, land use, and well construction features on water quality. Over the 2 years of that study, 170 trained volunteers conducted visual inspections of wells, plumbing, and the immediate surrounding areas and collected water samples from 701 private wells across most of the counties in the state. In addition, a survey was sent to 450 well owners who received water testing results in 2006. And so this was done after that water testing, and they responded with 6 to 12 months later, and their return rate was just over 64%. The water testing was analyzed for 8 contaminants, some of it including lead, total chloroform, and E. coli bacteria. So some key findings from that 2009 study in regards to well construction. Best practices in well construction or recommended design features include the following 5 features. The well has a metal or plastic casing. The wellhead is visible and above ground as opposed to buried in its entirety. The well has a sealed sanitary cap on it to prevent ground level contaminants from entering the well, such as runoffs or from animal waste. The casing and caps are sealed with cement grout, and the ground surrounding the well is sloped away from the top of the well or the well head. Of all of the 701 wells sampled, about 13% were buried, and most of those were drilled prior to 1970. Although there were 8 that they sampled that were drilled after 1990, and 6% of the total samples were older hand-dug wells. Of those wells visible above ground, 16% had sanitary sealed well caps, and 62% had a standard cap, typically a thin cover on top of aluminum or plastic. Visual inspections also indicated that 18% had a cement seal visible at the top, although they couldn't confirm whether that seal extended down that entire casing. And an estimate of 5% had both a sanitary cap in conjunction with cement sealant. So kind of the key takeaway from that well construction is that very few of the wells really meet those construction standard recommendations. For the water testing results, health-related pollutants may be symptomless and have no obvious taste or odors, and documenting the impact of polluted drinking water on the health of residents using private water supply can be very difficult because most pollutants require long-term exposure and they tend to mimic the effect of other air or foodborne pollutants. So those that create acute effects, such as bacteria, can have symptoms similar to common viral or bacterial illnesses. About 41% of the samples from the private wells tested in this study failed at least one safe drinking water standard. The good news, though, is that 89% of those failed only one of the 8 possible contaminants. About a third of the wells had chloroform bacteria, which is similar to national rates for private wells. Unfortunately, E. coli bacteria was found in 14% of private wells, and that should be completely absent from drinking water. After testing, most bacterial contaminations appear to have resulted from animal waste, which likely came from groundwater. And this was most likely in the southwest and southeastern parts of the state, and Lancaster County is included in that southeast region of that study. Analysis show that good well construction with the more recommended designs, like previously mentioned, makes contamination by coliform or E. coli less likely. 12% of the first draw water samples had elevated lead levels. This was more common in south central and southeastern Pennsylvania, and researchers concluded this is most likely from corrosion of metal and plumbing components. Lead contamination was found to be largely from metal plumbing components that were exposed to acidic and soft raw groundwater. Again, just as a reminder, Most of these water wells were installed before 1991 when the federal lead and copper rule was passed. So that's one reason why we might see those elevated levels within those private wells. Nitrate concentrations in wells were statistically correlated with the distance to the nearest cornfield and other crop fields. And overall, up to 80% of the well owners that were shown to have unhealthy drinking water took steps to successfully avoid the problem within 1 year of having their water tested, which is very important to note. And that is based upon that survey that they sent out later after all of the water has been tested. Most well owners were very satisfied with their private water well, and 84% were not willing to pay even more than $10 per month to have access for public water. A total of 16% were willing to pay some monthly fee to have public water. Overall, 63 to 78% of well owners were supportive of potential regulations targeting well construction, well location, and well driller certification. Findings suggest that regulations are warranted to increase mandatory testing of private water wells at the completion of new well construction and before finalization of any real estate transactions. And I think, that 2009 study really complemented the first panel very well and kind of some of the stuff that they talked about, even though this is an older study that we are talking about right now. But I will hand it over to Laura to talk a little bit more about our upcoming study that we will be publishing.
Right. Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, and we wanted to really highlight that finding that many private well owners want to continue using it, right? Hence that survey data of they didn't want to go on a public water system and pay for it. So very interesting. I know right now we pay dearly where I live in Dauphin County for public water and sewer. So something for the legislature to think about. So I'm going to briefly outline our forthcoming study, which again, we're glad to talk again with you senators when this is released early in 2026. This study is designed to survey septic use users, so residential owners who typically also have a well on their property, and to understand the factors that might be hindering proper maintenance across the state. There was a survey done, completed by over 650 residents throughout the state, and about 44% of them in urban, 56% in our rural counties. Unlike public sewer systems that are monitored by local municipalities, sanitation districts or utilities, on-lot septic systems are typically maintained, again, by individual homeowners after they are installed. I will also make a quick side note. Based on the earlier study and this one, homeowners frequently do not have the original documentation that comes with it. So persons who might buy a home might have no idea when it was built or any of the specifications. So there is lacking information. In addition to a survey, this study, like the previous one, has also conducted some water tests and tested for very similar elements compared to the earlier one. And that is a sample of those surveyed. And so that those findings will be part of the study. As for key findings, the center typically does not publicly release specific findings from our studies until we do final revisions and reviews and publish them. But we thought it was important to give this committee a preview of those. As we noted, the EPA recommends septic system inspections every 3 years, pumping every 3 to 5 years. When published, we expect this report is going to show these practices are not being followed by most homeowners. Certainly cost is a barrier, but homeowners, we know, will report in high numbers that municipalities are not requiring proof of that either. So there's an interaction, I think, between municipal ability and capacity to enforce these things and whether homeowners are aware and feel compelled to do it. The average lifespan of a septic system is estimated to be between 15 and 40 years, according to the EPA. We know from this study that the majority of septic systems are over 20 years old, and a notable proportion are more than 40 years old. So they exceed the lifespan that is recommended. And this raises concerns about potential environmental impacts for this aging infrastructure, as was already noted. This study is going to provide water test results for 125 properties throughout rural counties in particular, and they will show that violations of federal health-based drinking water standards do continue. A preliminary overview of findings shows, again, on properties where septic systems are regularly maintained, contamination is less likely. Deeper wells and longer isolation distances between wells and septic systems are also a key variable. So I think these studies are serving to reinforce, reiterate some of the points made by the first panel as well here. In conclusion, we know the state and the legislature has important responsibilities with regard to public health. The research we have released and will release in the near future does support the value of increased attention to how state and local government can further promote the safety of the private water supply for millions of residents. So we thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and are glad to answer any questions.
Again, thank you both for joining us this morning. I'll open up for any questions. Is there any questions? Senator Malone?
Sorry, messing with my mic. Yeah, we heard the recommendations of using the drilling licensing with UCC standards to get building wells in line with best practices. And you mentioned that there are local ordinances that are doing some good work. Do you have any like standouts as far as local ordinances that you would put forward that might be useful as templates?
Thank you for that question, Senator Malone. I think, the latest study may have some examples of that. We don't have them available today, but we will certainly also follow up with the researcher to make sure that we have some indication of which municipalities might have some sample ordinances or that are doing an effective job with enforcement. So we'll be glad to provide that to you.
Any other questions? Senator Costa, any questions? You're on mute. Oh, you must be on another call. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us both. We'll appreciate that. That concludes our second panel. We're going to move on to our third panel, our academic perspective, representative from Penn State Extension, York County. Morning, Jody.
Good morning, Senator Miller and Senator Malone. Thank you for the invitation to be part of today's discussion regarding private drinking water. My name is Jody Sulpizio. I'm a natural resources educator for Penn State Extension. I also coordinate the Master Watershed Steward Program in York County. Today, I'm here representing Penn State Extension's water team. If you're not familiar with Penn State Extension, we are part of the College of Agricultural Sciences within the Pennsylvania State University, Pennsylvania's only land-grant college. With a presence in each of our 67 counties, Penn State Extension empowers farmers, agribusinesses, youth, and communities with science-based education and innovative solutions to advance agriculture, enhance a healthy and safe food supply, and promote responsible natural resource stewardship across Pennsylvania and beyond. I'm here to provide education about private water supply protection, including proper well construction, wellhead protection, and private well safety. More than 1 million homes in Pennsylvania are served by private water supplies, which include wells, springs, and cisterns. More than a quarter of all adults in the state rely on a private water supply as their primary source of drinking water. There are 36,809 registered wells attributed to Lancaster County, the second highest number per county next to Chester County. The real number is likely more because those are the registered wells. In 1990, the census reported 51,000 private wells in Lancaster County. So unfortunately, many individual water wells have never been properly tested, and their owners are generally uninformed about proper well management. Pennsylvania is one of only 2 states that does not have mandatory statewide construction standards for private wells. While some local regulations do exist in a few counties and municipalities, there are no statewide requirements. Private water systems are not regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act because they serve fewer than 25 people or have fewer than 15 service connections. They commonly serve single residential units in communities that are located outside the public water system service areas. Because private water systems are not regulated, the owner or user is voluntarily responsible for protecting the water resource to prevent pollution, testing water quality, and implementing treatment to improve water quality. Although they are not required to, private water system users are encouraged to ensure that their water quality meets national and state drinking water standards to protect their health. Because there are no well construction standards in Pennsylvania, some important components of a properly constructed drinking water well are often not installed, likely in an effort to reduce the cost of the well to the well driller and the homeowner. Proper construction features and wellhead area management can protect private water wells from surface water contamination. Anything that ends up on the ground surface, such as animal waste, sediment, fertilizer, chemicals, has the potential to seep into wells with surface runoff after rain events. To help lessen the possibility that drinking water isn't contaminated by surface water runoff, Penn State recommends the following 5 well construction features to help protect the drinking water supply from surface contamination. So well casing extending 12 inches above the ground surface. Making sure the casing is extended helps keep surface water from entering the well. If the well is lower than the ground or buried in a pit, a well driller may be able to help with extending the casing above the surface. The ground sloping away from the wellhead. If the ground around the wellhead is sloped gently away from the wellhead and casing, surface water will be directed away from the well, reducing the possibility of contamination. Well casing to bedrock. This is a well construction feature that can only be implemented when the well is drilled. Having the well casing extend to bedrock also helps to create a barrier between surface water runoff and the water supply. Casing can also be professionally inspected with down well cameras to check for leaks or damage. Grout seal. When a well is drilled, a grout seal, usually made of bentonite clay material, can be put in place around the casing. The grout material expands to fill the open space that remains outside the well casing within the larger drilled borehole. It creates a tight seal against the casing to reduce the chances of surface water entering the groundwater using that open space. Grout is usually not used on private wells in Pennsylvania unless it is required by local ordinances or requested by the homeowner. And a sanitary well cap. Newly constructed wells in Pennsylvania are not typically installed with sanitary caps and must often be requested by the well owner. This is a feature that can be installed on an existing well. Most wells have a standard well cap that leaves an air gap between the well casing and the cap. This gap allows for insects, vermin, and surface water to potentially enter a well. A sanitary well cap has a rubber gasket which creates a tight seal around the well casing and also a small screen that allows for necessary airflow. A well owner can purchase a sanitary cap from a well driller, hardware stores, or online sources. It can be installed by a well professional or by a well owner with some electrical skills. Less than 20% of wells in Pennsylvania have all 5 of these features, but research by Penn State showed that even having a few in place can significantly reduce surface water impacts on private water supplies. The two most important features missing from most private wells may be a sanitary well cap and a grout seal. These components are required by most states because they help protect groundwater by sealing the well from potential surface contamination, in particular coliform bacteria and E. coli bacteria. With a private water system, it's a good practice to establish a wellhead protection area at least 100 feet around a well and limit any potentially polluting activities in this area. This area around the well is where activities on the surface are most likely to impact the groundwater supply. This includes spraying pesticides, dumping waste chemicals, using fertilizers, allowing for animal waste, or any activities that could compact the ground. Homeowners using wells, springs, or cisterns as their water supply should consider having their water tested routinely every 13 to 14 months for bacteria and every 3 years for most other contaminants. Testing drinking water should be performed by a certified water testing laboratory. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection has a current listing of accredited drinking water testing laboratories. Water testing on private water supplies is also available through the Penn State Agricultural Analytical Laboratory. Drinking water test kits are available at participating county extension offices or directly from the Agricultural Analytical Services Lab. Homeowners using water from a well or spring should consider having it tested for the following reasons. Unlike public water systems, private water supply testing is a voluntary responsibility of the homeowner. There are no government agencies or programs that routinely test private water systems for homeowners. Penn State studies have found that about 50% of private water systems fail to meet at least one of the drinking water standards that public supplies are held to. Many pollutants found in private water systems have no obvious smells or visual indicators and can only be detected through laboratory testing. Water testing is generally economical and convenient, with many testing laboratories located throughout the state. Water testing provides vital information to document the quality of drinking water. Data from previous tests completed through third-party testing may be necessary to prove in court that a nearby land use has damaged a drinking water supply. The only way homeowners can be certain that their drinking water isn't contaminated is to have the water tested routinely. Penn State Extension's water team participates in well water testing research and disseminates findings to the community. In 2024, nearly 200 private wells, springs, and cisterns were tested as part of educational webinars and workshops, helping private water supply owners identify and solve health-related drinking water problems. This project tested 197 private water supplies in Pennsylvania, including Lancaster County. There were 164 health-based standard failures, and additional 139 secondary or aesthetic failures identified in these water samples. Funding for this program was made available from the Pennsylvania Department of Health's cooperative agreement with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Environmental Health Capacity Building Initiative. Penn State Extension has resources available to help private well users to properly manage their water supply, including water testing, problem solving, and water conservation. These resources include online articles, courses, videos, publications, and workshops that can be found at our website at extension.psu.edu. In addition, we have 2 volunteer programs that aid Penn State Extension in educating Pennsylvania residents about protecting private water supplies: the Master Well Owner Network and the Master Watershed Stewards. The Master Well Owner Network trains volunteers throughout Pennsylvania to help educate rural homeowners on the proper management of private water wells. These volunteers become part of a statewide network of Master Well owners. The Penn State Master Watershed Steward Program was established to educate and empower volunteers to protect environmental resources. Master Watershed Stewards work with the community to improve the health of our streams, rivers, and other natural resources. We currently have the Master Watershed Steward Program in 42 counties, including Lancaster. Lancaster currently has 53 volunteers in the program. Penn State Extension will continue to carry out research and offer educational programs and water testing to residents who utilize private water supplies in Pennsylvania. To be notified when drinking water-related programs are offered, you can sign up on our website to receive emails and select drinking and residential water as one of your areas of interest. So thank you for your time and willingness to learn more about protecting private drinking water supplies. I do have some educational materials out on the table and a water test kit and a sanitary well cap that I brought today. So I'm available for questions, so thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us. I'll open it to any questions from my colleagues. Senator Malone.
Yeah, thanks. Just running over. Actually, a lot of questions I initially lined out were answered in the discussion, but I am curious with related to cost. So I helped drill water wells with a rigging team over 30 years ago. What's the cost to try to grout seal a well after the fact?
So I would have to defer to a well driller on the cost of.
Because I'm very familiar with setting the pipe and sealing it at the time of drilling, but I was just curious what that was. Similar question as far as the sanitary well cap. What's the
Yeah, you
cost
could get
of that?
a sanitary well cap for under $100.
Okay.
I think. And then like water testing, those costs I would know more about than the well drilling part.
Well, that was going to be the
Yeah.
third question in that line. What is that kind of cost for testing? You had mentioned doing an annual and then 3 years, I think you said?
Yeah, so we definitely recommend bacteria testing every year, but 13 to 14 months. You want to hit every season at some point because the water table does change. Bacteria tests you can get done pretty cheap. We have packages, very basic package for around $100 that people could do. Then our packages go up to I think just around $200. Penn State does not test for PFAS and the pesticide testing. That would be another expense. It's a little more expensive testing, but you could get a pretty good test of chemicals. I've seen, packages between $200 and $300.
Thank you.
Any other questions from my colleagues online? Hearing and seeing none, thank you very much for joining us. That concludes our third panel. We'll move right into our fourth panel. Stakeholder input. We have representatives from Penn Future, Clean Water Campaign Manager, and also PA Groundwater Association, the president of the organization. Okay, Ali, if you want to kick us off.
Good morning, Chairman Miller, Senator Malone, and members of the committee. And thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on this important issue. My name is Ali Cugini, and I am the Clean Water Campaign Manager at Penn Future. Penn Future is a statewide environmental advocacy nonprofit. We envision a commonwealth in which all people enjoy stable climate, clean air, and pure water. What brings me here today is our pursuit of upholding our state's constitution and every Pennsylvanian's right to clean water. Let's begin by addressing a central question. What happens when a well is improperly installed? More than 3 million people in Pennsylvania rely on private wells for their drinking water. When a well is improperly sited, cased, or drilled, it creates a direct vertical conduit from the contaminated surface environment straight down into the shared groundwater aquifer. This is where the environmental breakdown occurs. Without the required sediment grout seal around the well casing, a professional standard enforced in almost every other state, surface pollutants like pesticides, road salts, or bacteria from septic systems flow freely and rapidly down the well bore. Even more concerning, the improper casing allows emerging toxins like PFAS, forever chemicals, from surface industrial runoff to bypass the natural filtration provided by soil and rock, move it rapidly into people's drinking water supplies. The harm does not stop at one family's well. An unsealed or improperly abandoned well threatens the integrity of neighboring private wells and the entire aquifer, allowing pollution to spread throughout the community. Yet we are one of only 2 states that fail to enforce industry standards on well siting and construction, and one of 3 without statewide drilling license. We are allowing a dangerous, unsealed highway for pollution straight into our groundwater. This regulatory gap is not an abstract policy issue. It places the entire burden of contamination and poor construction on Pennsylvania homeowners to fix, placing undue economic and environmental burdens on our citizens. The lack of statewide standards for well construction and driller proficiency directly jeopardizes human health and imposes unexpected financial hardship. The data is clear. We face widespread failure as studies show that a staggering 41% of private wells in Pennsylvania have failed to meet at least one health-based drinking water standard. A separate USGS study found that in the lower Susquehanna Basin, 70% of private wells were unsafe for drinking without treatment. This means that without standards to guide where and how wells are built, Pennsylvanians are needlessly exposed to unsafe water contaminated by viruses, bacteria, and toxins. Pennsylvania is currently one of 3 states that does not require private well drillers to demonstrate any level of experience or proficiency. This zero barrier to entry places the entire legal and financial burden of poor construction onto the homeowner. So, when hiring a driller, property owners have no way to verify if the individual is properly trained. If a well is improperly sited or poorly constructed, the property owners have no legal recourse to hold the driller accountable. Pennsylvania has a moral obligation to protect its citizens from preventable health and financial risks. Instituting and enforcing standards are the mechanisms needed to finally address this silent crisis of environmental and economic injustice. The proposal before us is a simple yet critical measure designed to rectify decades of regulatory neglect. It is not about new, burdensome regulations. It is about establishing professional accountability and ensuring existing industry standards are upheld. The proposal provides consumer protections by establishing a transparent licensing process based on experience, requiring companies to demonstrate bonding and liability coverage, and utilizing the Department of State's existing mechanisms to ensure government efficiency. The initiative is a result of extensive collaboration and enjoys a strong, broad consensus, including support from the Pennsylvania Groundwater Association and the Marcellus Shale Coalition. We are not adding complexity. We are simply affirming the right of every Pennsylvanian to safe drinking water. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on such an important issue.
Thank you. Bill.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, Senator Malone, and the other senators online. I'm here representing 2 entities, or wearing 2 hats, if you will. The first is the grand title of former president of the Pennsylvania Groundwater Association, actually currently their executive director. The second is I am president of a small family business now called William W. Ricard, Inc. It is a groundwater service company. We drill wells, we do pumps, we do water treatment. We are located in Hanover, Pennsylvania. My geographical proximity makes me a unique, I think, person to speak on all things well related, in that I am now and have currently been we'll say licensed in the state of Maryland. I can officially say that. I can't say that in Pennsylvania because I'm not licensed in Pennsylvania. I have been licensed in West Virginia, been licensed in Delaware, been licensed in Chester County within Pennsylvania. As far as our association goes, we were founded approximately 56 years ago with a goal of trying to educate people on all things groundwater, as well as to try to advocate the furtherance of the industry through introduction of licensing regulations so as to maintain the industry, as well as preserve the qualities of the waters of the Commonwealth going forward. So just as a quick snapshot, when you go last, a lot of the important things have been said, and I won't waste the committee's time by being, even though the points are very important, I tried to separate out my remarks from what's already been said. Just to let you know the magnitude of things, you've heard the numbers of how many people use water, but I think it's important to know that the people who actually do what I do, the groundwater industry, there are approximately 250 companies that actually drill wells within the Commonwealth. My association incorporates a little better than 50% of that, so annually about 55% of them are members of the Pennsylvania Groundwater Association. That amounts to around 2,000 people and generated annual sales. It's hard to put a firm number on, but it's approximately a $400 million industry within Pennsylvania. And similarly, as you broaden it into an actual more industry of incorporating the sciences and the disciplines around it, we have manufacturers, we have suppliers who also constitute our membership, which brings us in annually representing approximately 160 firms within the Commonwealth. Other than that, I can speak to some things maybe that have been said, but again, I hope to be used as a resource for the committee to talk about things. So give me a question and let me out of the box.
I guess I'll start us off. You know, we talked about this proposed legislation and a lot of good stakeholder buy-in from industry partners as well, and kind of open it to both of you. What pushback do you anticipate, and why hasn't it done before? Just out of curiosity, any opinion on that, like what we can anticipate in terms of pushback?
Pushback, so you can see my age and my tenure within this industry. There have been several legislative efforts before, more so on the promulgation of regulation rather than licensure. So I'm going to try to keep them a little bit separate. The historic model has been the failure of regulation of the resource before. A lot of it was through maybe more of a misinformation campaign and scare tactics saying that DEP was going to come onto your property, inspect your property, fine you if you have old wells that were not properly taken care of. The opponents of the proposed regulations at the time have always threatened that it would take away the economic vitality and livelihood of individuals currently engaged in the profession, i.e. you will lose your job if these regulations are passed. And that there's never been any merit to that. You can take any industry historically through time, and the first doctor didn't have a license to hang in his office, but we know where we've come to.
I would echo everything he said and, yeah, amplify the misinformation about the concerns that it would raise the cost of well drilling or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like a well thought out proposal, kind of the grandfathering and the period of time to actually get the license. So I'll open up to any other questions. Senator Coster, Senator Malone, if you have any.
I just wanted to try to jump back at that cost. Sorry. Tech. Yeah, jump back to that cost thing. If a homeowner is, looking and they want to get a grout seal on it, right, what is that cost and entail?
Let me start somewhere else and come back to that, Senator Malone. When you were saying that, sitting in the audience, there's been an expression that I have used throughout my career, and let me say this specifically. My family business was started in 1890. I am a sixth generation doing what my forefathers have done. Within that, the regulations as far as how they apply to our family business in Maryland, they started in the 50s. I'm already wishing I had information to give to you. I'm already thinking of information that I will take away and try to get to send to the committee or ask you to do it independently. You have a neighboring relationship with the state of Maryland that has had regulations talking about construction criteria, licensing, separation distances, everything that is part of this since the 50s. Look at their numbers compared to the other statistics that were given. Sorry, getting back to your question. Throughout the majority of my career, I have made the statement to potential customers that I believe to be true, that if we were to spend $500 to grout your well, which is the sealing of the annular space that goes around the casing that prevents the surface water influence of getting into and bringing contaminants with it, that potentially could save you $5,000 when it comes to the operation of your well. A customer would say, well, how can that be? Well, if you prevent a problem, which I have a degree in engineering, so I believe in prevention. As you prevent the problem, the economics are drastically in your favor by saving the treatment costs of a treatment system for a varying, obviously I make assumptions there, but things that you would have to remove from the water. Your actual question then, sir, is to the point of there is nothing we can do to actually go back to a well that is existing and grout it, but we do have the availability through the modernization of materials and techniques that have been proven, and we do them within our industry, to reconstruct a well, if you will. You have a familiarity with the setting of the casing. We can't do anything on the outside of the well, but we can do things on the inside. Typically in the industry, a domestic water well is of a 6-inch variety. To be properly done according to public water specifications, if we were doing it for above of 25 users in a permanent establishment, we would have to install that with 6-inch casing within a 10-inch diameter borehole. That space in between those, what we refer to as the annular space, that's where the grout goes. So the well's already done, it's finished, it's 30 years later. We can go inside of the existing casing with an inner casing and put a device at the bottom of it and then place the grout between the inside casing and the existing casing. So there are things we can do.
So there are ways for them to be able to cost effectively affect their
Yes.
benefit. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from my colleagues online? Again, thank you both. Appreciate everybody's testimony. Senator Malone, any closing remarks, thoughts?
I just really want to thank everybody. Hearing the testimony and the work people are trying to put in to be sure to reduce the burden on the homeowners themselves, and then to also, I can't imagine that it's helpful for the drillers to not have a standard either. So I really appreciate hearing the work going into trying to organize and set that up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just conclude, again, thank you to all of our testifiers today for being with us here this morning, and also our host for allowing us to take over their room here. I do want to plug one of our next policy hearings will be more generally about clean air and water, probably located in the Lehigh Valley in the next couple of months. You know, when I think about the constitutional requirement or obligation we have to our Pennsylvanians, I can't say with confidence that we're meeting that requirement. In the Lehigh Valley specifically, our asthma is one of the top in the country, not necessarily a statistic you want to be at the top of. So there's a lot, my point is that there's a lot of work to do in the air and water space, and I appreciate all the efforts from the stakeholders that testified today and joined us today, and this will be definitely an ongoing conversation as we prioritize at the Senate Democratic Caucus, clean and safe communities. So again, appreciate everybody. This was recorded, will be posted online, pasenatormiller.com/policy, and this concludes